And such a system dares to call itself spiritual, harmonial, reformatory? It does. But thank God, the days of pseudo-spiritualism, in whose trained myriads of insanities, wrongs, irreligions of all pestilent sort, non-immortalitism, a host of importations from the pit, follow as harlots follow an army, scattering death, horror, and devastation on every hand. Yes, thank heaven, the false will soon be succeeded by a true and godly spiritualism, and instead of being possessed and obsessed by the maleficent harpies from the mid-region, as is too often the case now, people will be enlightened, instructed, and saved from ruin instead of being plunged therein. For the noble, the true, the religious, and the pure spirits, from realms where God's presence sanctifies all hearts, will come to aid man in his hour of greatest need. The true spiritualization will bring peace on earth and goodwill among men, instead of hatred between couples and absurd envyings and jealousies among mediums and believers. It will effect the destruction of all spiritualistic and philosophic pretense. The current sophistry of all-rightism, pretentious mock philanthropy, whereof so much now floats upon the surface of the singular sea called falsely spiritualism. A man is no more a spiritualist because he believes in a physically demonstrated immortality than a child is a horse because born in a stable. If people cannot be spiritualists without submitting to pestilent control of wretches from the middle state, or without losing conscience, virtue, and moral cleanliness, they had better let the whole subject alone, and rest as contented as may be with the faiths and creeds bequeathed by their ancestors. It will not do to meddle with things so mysterious as spiritualism, in its nature, influence, and results, unless perfectly fortified in God, with a strong and holy purpose and a resolute and unbending will. As I gazed out upon the surrounding glories of my new world, I could not forbear or repress a desire, if possible, to take one glance at those who yet dwelt in infamy, although disembodied. This wish, though a silent one, was perceived by him who stood near me. Sadly, mournfully, he gazed down into my soul, made no reply in words, but slowly placing me between himself and Nellie, who had been joined by one to whom she was very dear indeed, directed our steps towards the pleasant grove before alluded to. Passing swiftly through this, we soon came to its outer verge, from which, to my utter astonishment, we could look down into a very gulf of horrors, as if on the edge of a frightful precipice. I knew that I stood upon the borders of the middle state. Believing that more is to be gained by descriptions of the good and excellent than by exciting the horror of deformity, I forbear, in this introductory volume, to recount the terrors of the awful hell of the vicious and self-damned soul. Suffice it that I beheld scenes of lust, insanity, debauchery, and all vileness, sufficiently dreadful to appall the stoutest heart of any, save one who dwells in the same awful fantasies, insanities, and evils, around the heads of those who wandered up and down the noisome lanes of alleyways were wreaths of twining, writhing serpents, instead of crowns and coronets of light. There were many who believed in literal hells of fire, and such were surrounded by spheres of flame, and therein must burn and suffer so long as to fearful fantasies shall last, until they be redeemed by self-effort. Drunkards, libertines, gabblers, all evil things and persons were there, along with atheists and other intellectual sinners. On an eminence in the midst of the deepest and most fearful hell, I saw the exact image of one of earth's so-called great philosophers, and it was given to me that the man there represented was doomed, when his life on earth shall be ended, to expiate his terrible offenses against God, nature, religion, and his own conscience and his fellow men, by mental sufferings too terribly to be adequately described. Men know the right, and well approve it too. They know the wrong, and yet the wrong pursue. So with the philosopher. The man knew better than he taught, and when he dies, unless he shall repent, his doom is a hell whose terrors are indeed fearful. Nor will he be able to emerge thence before the cries of his scores of thousands of deluded victims, some of whom have been driven to vice, crime, insanity, and suicide by his execrable teachings, shall be changed into appeals to God in his behalf. One of the punishments after death consisting in atoning for one's bad and baleful influence while on earth. And the more extensive this has been, the more fearful the penalty self-inflicted therefore. The man who has taught millions that God is a revengeful being, that he ever stands ready to hurl ruin and destruction on the world, to rain literal fire and brimstone on the earth, and thus frighten people into woe and insanity, must abide the consequences, and in the world beyond, and compelled to face the dreadful music himself may have evoked. And so with others, let their influence be what it may. Eternal justice rules the destiny of mankind. The sooner or later its behests must and will be accomplished. I turned in the all-fright from the horrible scene, but not without reaping a mental treasure from that which I had beheld, both of the soul world and the middle state. It will be remembered that I asked certain questions which were not responded to. These questions and others had been uppermost in my mind all along, and now as our faces once again turned towards the bright scenes of the soul world, I realized that neither it nor its fearful antipodes were absolute fixtures or fixities. The human soul is kaleidoscopic. The scenes it forever conjures up before it from out its mighty deeps, and by which it's surrounded, are constantly and forever changing. No matter whether its locality be on earth, and the mid-region to the great world's atmosphere, or the confines to the great states, embodied or free, or whether it be the dweller in a city of the divine souls, the law is the same and incessantly operative.